Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. So for today's video, I will teach you how to perform T-test for two independent groups and how to present the results in a scholarly manner. Other terms for the T-test for two independent groups are independent samples T-test or independent measures research design or between subjects design. You will use T-test for two independent groups when you want to compare the means of precisely two different groups, no more and no less. Because if you are to compare more than two groups, then you have to use another statistical analysis, particularly the analysis of variance or ANOVA. So again, let me just reiterate that the two sets of data should come from two completely separate groups of participants. For example, a social psychologist may want to compare the political attitudes of young adults who are millennials to those who are members of Generation X. So in this particular example, you can see that we have two groups here. So we have the group of millennials, and then you will compare that to the group of Generation X. So for this particular example, T-test for two independent groups is appropriate to use as our statistical analysis. Another example, job satisfaction between, or you want to measure the level of job satisfaction between public school teachers and private school teachers. So our two-factor groups are public school teachers and then private school teachers. So clear na when to use the T-test for two independent groups. For the assumptions of the T-test for two independent groups, first, it uses means and standard deviations. Since T-test for two independent group is parametric, usually for the non-parametric equivalence, you have to use the mean ranks or the median. So samples should be drawn from two normal populations. Let's say your goal is to compare the political attitudes of millennials and Generation X. And then you have to perform the normality test, either Kolmogorov or Shapiro. I had a separate video, prior video, in performing the normality test. So pwede nyo siyang tingnan din sa YouTube channel ko on how to perform normality test in SPSS. So for example, you run the data in SPSS, and then based on the results of the normality test, yung data under millennial is not normal, while the data using the Generation X is normal. So the final decision is you will use non-parametric. Kasi sabi nga natin, if the data is not normally distributed, it means there is a presence of outlier. And parametric test is very sensitive to outlier. So kahit na isang factor group lang ang lumabas using the normality test na hindi normal, then we cannot use the parametric. So kailangan yung two factor groups are with normal distribution or normal ang distribution nila. Then last assumption is that sample size should be large enough so that the distribution of sample means is approximately normal. So as sample size increases, the more the distribution becomes normal. So if the sample size is small and markedly non-normal, then we have to use the non-parametric alternatives, which are Wilcoxon test and Mann-Whitney test. And I will make a separate video on how to perform these two non-parametric alternatives. So this is the counterpart of the T-test for two independent groups in case that the distribution is not normal. So we will use Wilcoxon test and Mann-Whitney test. So there are two versions of independent samples T-test. So we have the equal population variances or equal variances assumed, and unequal population variances or equal variances not assumed. So for the researcher, it is important to identify the appropriate version of the T-test that will be used in our data. In order to do that, we have to use the Levine's test. For the Levine's test, we have the equal variances assumed and equal variances not assumed. So it will give us an idea what specific version of Ttest will be used based on the F statistic of our Levine's test. In SPSS, to determine if our data is statistically significant, it uses SIG. So this is the equivalent of or to p-value or the level of significance. So if the p-value or if the SIG is less than 0.05, it means it is significant. Then if it is greater than 0.05, it means it is not significant. So bakit natin kailangan alamin yon? Kasi that will determine what is the version of Ttest that will be used. So again, you have to look at the Levine's test that will be shown using the SPSS. So if the F statistic or the SIG or the p-value of the Levine's test is greater than 0.05, so it means it is not significant and we will use the version of equal variances assumed if the p-value of the Levine's test is greater than 0.05. So hanapin natin yung SIG under the Levine's test. And if the F statistic of the Levine's test is less than 0.05, it means it is significant. And then we will use the equal variances not assumed. So yun yung paraan para malaman anong version ng Ttest yung gagamitin natin. So again, you will use equal variances assumed if the p-value or the SIG is greater than 0.05. While you will use equal variances not assumed if the SIG or the p-value is less than 0.05. So suppose that our goal is, or you're a researcher, then you want to identify if there's a significant difference in the level of social entrepreneurial intention or SEI between male and female university students. So for this scenario, you will see that we have two factor groups here. We have the group of male and female university students. Based on this, we can formulate now our research question. So the research question is there a significant difference in the level of social entrepreneurial intention between male and female university students? Then from the question itself, we can now develop our hypothesis. There is no significant difference in the level of social entrepreneurial intention between male and female university students. Normally, the alternate or the hypothesis that you will reflect on your research paper or manuscript is the null hypothesis. Pero pwede naman din kung if you will use the alternative hypothesis. So for this demonstration, we will use the null hypothesis. So ito yung i-address natin using the Ttest. So we will test the hypothesis if there's really significant or no significant difference in the level of social entrepreneurial intention between male and female. May pagkakaiba ba or wala bang pagkakaiba? So sasagutin natin yan using the Ttest. So these are the commands that you have to perform using SPSS. So first is click Analyze, then Compare Means, and Independent Sample Ttest. Okay, sige, let's perform that in our SPSS. Yung data natin dito ay ayos na. Kasi I have another video wherein I perform or wait. For this video or for this data, ayos na yung sa data natin dito. I have a separate video on how to perform descriptive statistics. So for that, you have to put labels in your data. So we have nationality here. So Filipino and Korean. And then their actual age. Yung sex nila, one is male, two female. Then year level. So first year, second year, third year, fourth year. And then ito yung mga items for our variable social entrepreneurial intention. So it has 18 items. So kailangan nyo munang gawin is you have to assign labels or put labels in your data. Tapos, you can also check my previous video dun sa descriptive statistics using SPSS para makita kung paano gawin yon. And then you also have to get the overall mean for your construct. Okay, so let's proceed to our presentation of the Ttest. First is go to analyze. Yan, analyze. Then compare means. Analyze, compare means. Then click independent samples Ttest. Since ito yung gagamitin natin, since we have two factor groups. So click nyo lang yan, hintayin ninyo. Ibalik lang natin to para at least from the start tayo. So for the test variable, click SEI, yung overall mean ng construct ninyo, yung SEI. So you have to put that in our test variable dito. So click this arrow. And then since gusto natin i-compare yung two factor groups natin, yung male and female. So hanapin natin yung sex. Just click sex and click this arrow para mapunta doon sa grouping variable natin. As you can see, may question mark dito. So, tinatanong ni SPSS, anong klaseng sex or anong class, parang kailangan dito kasi we have to identify kung ano yung information na gusto natin i-compare. So, we have to click define groups. Di-define natin. Di ba, remember, sabi ko nga dun sa previous video ko, you have to be consistent doon sa mga labels or dun sa mga code na nilagay mo. Na, for example, 1 is male, then 2 is female. So, define groups, then just click or just type 1. And then, for the group 2, just type 2. So, 1 means male respondents, 2 female respondents. And then click continue and okay. So hintayin na natin. So ito na yung papakita niya na result. So we have the group statistics and independent samples test. For the latest version of SPSS, meron na rin siyang results for the effect size. Pero for the sake of our presentation or demonstration, we will only use the group statistics table and the independent samples test. So kagandahan kay SPSS din, kung lalagay mo na siya sa PowerPoint or sa Word, ano lang yung usual na copy-paste. So discuss natin to sa PowerPoint. Copy-paste natin dun sa PowerPoint natin. Okay, so again, we will only use two tables. One for the group statistics, so ito yung descriptive nila, male 140, female 203, mean, and then standard deviation. So as I've said, for the parametric test, usually it will use the mean and the standard deviation. And then the independent samples test. Yung area dito, yung Levine's test for equality of variances. So ito yung check muna natin para malaman what version of Ttest will be used. So makita nyo dito yung equal variances assumed and then equal variances not assumed. And then ito yung Ttest for equality of means, 95% confidence interval of the difference. So identify muna natin yung sa ano yung gagamitin natin na version. So again, let me just repeat the assumption. If the sig or the p-value is not significant, it means the sig is greater than 0.05. So our sig is, etong hanapin ninyo yung sig under the Levine's test for equality. Ayan, tingin mo nang titignan natin para malaman kung ano yung version na gagamitin natin. Based on the p-value of the Levine's test, it is 0.024, which is less than the p-value of 0.05. So it is statistically significant. Therefore, we will use equal variances not assumed. So ang titignan natin na data or results for the Ttest ay yung nandito sa baba, yung equal variances not assumed. Since the p-value of the Levine's test is less than 0.024, 0.05 kasi 0.024 to eh. So less than 0.05. So pag ganyan yung sa Levine's test natin, so the appropriate version for the t-test is the equal variances not assumed. So yung sa baba, yung titingnan natin. So since we will use the equal variances not assumed, second step is to look for the sig or the p-value under the equal variances not assumed. So dito nyo siya titignan. Sa two-sided or two-tailed to eh. So yung sa sig niya or dun sa p-value niya ay 0.013. Sa older version na makikita nyo dito ay yung sig. Tingnan natin kung may copy ako dito. Ayan na to. Ayan siya. Ito kasi ay latest version. So, yung pinakita niya ay yung sa one-tailed and two-tailed. So, gagamitin natin yung sa two-tailed. So, dito, yung sa sig or the p-value under the equal variances not assumed is 0.013. So, it is less than the p-value of 0.05. It means it is statistically significant. So, there is a significant difference. Ang ibig sabihin niyan, kapag the sig or the p-value is less than 0.05. The interpretation is to reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternative hypothesis, meaning there is a significant difference on the level of social entrepreneurial intention between male and female. So, yun ang ibig sabihin nun. After identifying the findings, we can now present our results. So, syempre, doon sa naka-reflect sa manuscript ninyo or doon sa paper ninyo, research paper, hindi naman lahat ng data na pinakita ni SPSS yung kailangan. So we have to finalize our table and we have to include the descriptives, yung sa mean, male and female, yung sa size, how many male, how many female respondents, the mean for male, mean for female, and then the standard deviation for both male and female groups. And then we have to use the t-test or the t-result, which is negative 2.497. Again, you will use the t-test or the t-value under equal variances not assumed. Ito, hindi yung sa equal variances assumed. And then the degrees of freedom, and then the sig or the p-value, which is 0.013, and the mean difference. So nakuha yung mean difference na pwede naman siya makalculate manually eh. Subtract nyo lang yung mean ng female tsaka ng male. Then yun na yung mean difference. So ito lang yung kailangan doon sa final table natin that will be reflected in our research paper. So hindi na kailangan tong standard error difference, yung sa F statistic ng Levine's test, pero you have to indicate that in your paper then na using the Levine's test, so you decided to use a specific version of t-test. Kasi nahanap yung para malaman anong version ng t-test yung ginamit ninyo. Kasi dalawang version yan eh. And then we can now make our interpretation. So after we finalize our table. So for the title of our table, we can indicate significant difference in social entrepreneurial intention between male and female university students. And this is our final table. Then we can now make a conclusion or interpretation based on our table. So table 1 shows the significant difference. So you have to indicate first the title in university students' social entrepreneurial intentions when grouped according to sex. The findings showed, so you have to describe first the findings, yung mga numerical values na nakuha natin. The findings show that there's a significant difference in the mean scores for male. Then you have to indicate the mean, the standard deviation, and female. Same with male, you have to indicate the mean and the standard deviation. And then respondents that indicate the t-value, which is 262.605. And then the degrees of freedom And then of course, the p-value. So ito importante itong p-value. After describing the data, yung table ninyo, you can now make a conclusion or interpretation. The results suggest that female students exhibit higher intention to be social as entrepreneurs compared to male students with a mean difference of negative 0.12749. So ito yung paggagawa ng interpretation. So again, when we are making an interpretation based on the table, you have to state what is the title of the table. Then you have to describe what are the numerical values that are stipulated or indicated in your table. And then you will now make an interpretation or conclusion. So based on the results suggest that female students exhibit higher intention to become socially entrepreneurs compared to male students with a mean difference of negative 1.12749. So ganito yung pagpe-perform ng Ttest and pagpe-present ng results using the Ttest. Usually ito yung mga interpretation na hinahanap din for publication. Okay, so that will be the end of our video tutorial. So again, I will make a separate video tutorial for the non-parametric measurements, which are the Wilcoxon and Mann-Whitney. Thank you, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye.